It is.
No, no, don't worry about it. I mean, you can pull it up on, if you have Wi-Fi. I can give you the link.
Test 1, 2.
Thank you.
Test 1.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the annual Tuskegee Airmen Convention and Business Meeting. We have an exciting workshop for you today. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Paula Page, and I'm the Communications Officer for the East Coast chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen. As you know, we have more than 50 chapters across the country, and the East Coast chapter is the host chapter this year. So this particular workshop, what we call Unlocking the Power of Storytelling, essentially says that every message, everything begins with a good story. That's why some commercials grab you more than others. That's why we have people in our families who are excellent storytellers and we gravitate to that. So we have an exciting panel today of journalists, former journalists, professors, and they're going to introduce themselves to you. But before we do that, I'll introduce you to the moderator for today. His name is Dion Haynes. Dion is a veteran reporter. He's worked at the he's worked at the Washington Post as a business editor, and I'll let him tell you who he is, and then he will introduce you to the rest of the panelists. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Paula. I don't think you really need to know that much about me. I'll just dive right into our program. First of all, just good morning, and it's really good to see all of you. I had very little involvement with the Tuskegee Airmen before Paula invited me to participate in this program. And I just want to say, just coming here this morning, I've already had the opportunity to talk to several of you, and I feel like I'm at home already. So thank you for that. And I'm just hoping that we can just pass on some information to you. In the conversations I've had with you, I see that you already have some really good stories. And hopefully we can just help you enhance those stories and maybe give you some more tools that you can use to publish those stories to a wider audience. I'm going to just kind of read my opening statement, which will hopefully set the tone for the conversation. And then after that, we'll just kind of dive in. I'll just sort of pose questions to the panelists. And we'll just kind of have a back and forth, and then at the end, we'll open it up for questions. So, just be sure to, keep your questions in mind, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So our purpose here is to ensure that the Tuskegee heroes are not forgotten, that even as they age and pass away, their stories will continue to be told and continue to inspire new generations. Why is this important? We don't have to go back too far to see our history being erased and suppressed. It's happening today. It's happening right now. Forces are wiping away any reporting of past racial brutality, diminishing the achievements of our people, pushing the idea that our history is divisive, that it harms them because it puts them in a negative light. Never mind that those actions harm us. The Tuskegee Airmen's stories uplift our wounded souls. 80 years after bursting into the national scene, they still are teaching us so many lessons about America. Not just about the institutionalized racism that was reality for hundreds of years, but how these young Black men busted open the doors for themselves and for all of us with their valor, hard work, sacrifice, hopes, dreams, education, grit, and excellence. We know that the idea of collecting, preserving, and disseminating their stories can seem daunting, but we hope this session will empower your chapter to dig for new stories and polish up old ones. The good news is that you're not alone. Now is the best time to get started. You've probably noticed that Americans are hungry for these stories. There's been an explosion of people tracking their family history, an explosion of resources to help. Today's technology has made it easier than ever before to do this research. Need some inspiration? Here are some resources. Lee Hawkins has an excellent podcast called What Happened in Alabama, and a book, I Am Nobody's Slave, How Uncovering My Family History Set Free. I would really encourage you to check it out. ABC News correspondent Pierre Thomas has recently examined his family history of enslavement in West Virginia, and this is also very, very interesting and very inspiring. Really, just what he was ble to find out about his family. There are, numerous other sites that deal with genealogy, and even though, your research may not deal specifically with genealogy, there still are a number of experts who would be able to help you, I believe, to be able to track down information either about your relatives or maybe people that you know in the chapters that you're in. I would just really encourage you to really seek out history professors, Black history professors, history students, journalism professors, journalism students, museums, historical societies. They could probably help you, at the very least, in maybe pointing out documents that will help to supplement the information that you have, and even to help you uncover new stories. So, all right, so with that, we're going to get started, and I will ask our panelists, our esteemed panel of A-list journalists to introduce themselves. And I've seen their bios, and their bios go on and on and on and on. And if we read their complete bios, we would really literally be here like all morning. But I'm going to ask you if you could maybe just summarize your vast achievements into maybe 2 or 3 sentences.
Thank you. Really appreciate being here with you. My name is Adele Banks. I'm projects editor and a national reporter at Religion News Service. Been there for 29 years. And before that, I worked in other newspapers. I worked at the Orlando Sentinel, and I also worked at upstate newspapers in New York, in Binghamton and Syracuse. And I also spent a short time in the Providence Journal in my home state of Rhode Island. One of my passions is to write about Black history because I work for Religion News Service, and also just in general, it's often Black religious history. But I am very happy to be here and look forward to talking to you more.
Thank you, Adele. I'm Glenn Proctor, and for all you airmen folks, I'm the only Marine in the room. Yes, I'm a retired executive editor of Richmond Times-Dispatch, former journalism professor, 13-year Marine, Vietnam veteran, and for DOD, I was just inducted into the DOD Journalism School Hall of Fame last year. So I'm very honored to be able to talk about military journalism on one side and civilian journalism on the other. And again, as Nadell and Dion said, very happy to be here, and welcome, brothers and sisters.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cheryl W. Thompson. I'm an investigative correspondent and senior investigative editor at NPR, where I've been for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I sat side by side for many years with Dion at the Washington Post, 22 for me. I'm not sure how long for you. I started when I was 10. And I am the first Black president of Investigative Reporters and Editors. It's a 6,000 member journalism organization, and I'm also an associate professor at George Washington University. And I am the daughter of an airman, and I am in the final throes of writing a book on the Tuskegee Airmen. And yesterday, I have to say this, it was announced that I am the Legacy Award recipient for the Washington Association of Black Journalists, which means, as my husband says, you're old.
Do you want to mention the name of your book, or is it?
No, we're good. Because it could change.
It's fluid. Hi, I'm Yana Rice Lamb. I'm happy to be here with you today. I've always loved the Tuskegee Airmen's history and meeting them over the years. I teach journalism at Howard University. I've been there for 2 decades now. And before that, I worked in newspapers and magazines. I was at the Toledo Blade, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, New York Times, and then Child Essence. I was editor-in-chief of Heart and Soul magazine and BT Weekend magazines. So, and I'm also a co-founder of FierceForBlackWomen.com. So I still practice. One of our former professors says we teach what we do and do what we teach. But I look forward to our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Barlow. I'm also a recovering journalist, and I teach writing and public speaking at the University of Bridgeport. I'm also a private pilot, and I'm just so happy to be in this room. But more germane, I consult with PR people, so feel free to fire away with questions.
Mike, you could hang on to the microphone because I'm going to start with you. So, Mike, I'm going to ask you to frame our conversation. You have a really sort of interesting take on how we can get started. I think sort of the first impulse would be for people to just kind of dive in and just try to do everything. But your thought and your philosophy is that maybe we take a step back and maybe to first strategize first and maybe do a little bit of research before you dive into the work. And I think you had a couple of areas that people can get started with. One is to assemble a list of journalists and other supporters who might be interested in whatever news they're able to pick up. Rather than trying to do sort of a mass mailing, really take the time to find some people who would be more sympathetic to the cause. So I'm wondering if you can kind of elaborate on how to get started. And I think you also have some thoughts about polishing up some of those old bios.
Where to start? Thank you, Dion. Thank you so much, and again, thank you for having me here. So I come at this from a marketing background. I was a journalist, and so marketing was considered a dirty word in journalism. I'm approaching this as a marketer. The first thing you learn in marketing is don't market to people who aren't interested. only market to people who already love you. And you can say, well, that's cheating, but that's the way you have to do it, okay? Because what you want to do is you want to take their love and you want to amplify it and you want to return their love. Now, being serious, right? In other words, like, who are the people who are interested in our story, right? They're going to be historians, they're going to be teachers, they're going to be pilots and aviators and people who are already involved in the subject. So what you want to do is please don't send out don't send out pitches to everybody. In other words, mass marketing is dead. So don't do that, right? Here's my suggestion: search. Use Google or whatever your preferred search engine. You search for articles, blogs, Substacks, videos, podcasts, any and all content on related topics, and get the names of the people who created that content, because those are the people who are already interested. They've already raised their hand and said, we're interested in this, right? Okay, send a customized pitch to those people. And don't pitch anybody. In other words, just save your energy for the people who are most likely to listen. Right? People who have already proven themselves to be sympathetic, and that's really the key. And that they've already. So, for examples, again, aviation writers, history teachers, pilots, airport managers. All airports have little newsletters. Just remember that. It's like okay. Military aviation enthusiasts. There's a big world of military aviation enthusiasts. Some of them are a little weird, but still, yeah, exactly, right. As pilots that pilots are okay and some are not okay. World War II buffs or WWII buffs. People who already write podcasts or write about civil rights, social justice, Black history. They're all game for you, right? So don't overlook the people who create content also around self-help and self-growth. And I hope that Glenn touches on this also, because that's such a large part of our lives here. I don't think there's anyone in this room who's like under 21. So we all know the importance, thank you for laughing, of focusing on our own mental health. This is really part of that story, right? For me, flying, writing, Tai Chi, that's one of my Tai Chi pants, they're all the same. Because flying is actually, there's a big, in other words, when you, and tell me when to shut up, but when the Tuskegee, it's really, really important to remember that the Tuskegee Airmen were not flying 747s, right? They were flying Curtiss P-40 Warhawks, Bell P-39 Air Cobras, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, and most famously, the North American P-51 Mustang. These are really, really difficult, dangerous planes to fly. Just getting into them, when you crank up the engine, it's like that's the loudest thing you've ever heard in your life, and you're scared. And this is one thing that those of you in the room who are pilots know, is that you never really get over entirely that fear and the nausea and the sweats when you're first, so when you crank the engine, it's like you're in a different world. And so that ability to get over their fear, because most of these guys also started there, when they did their first flight, it was an open cockpit, like biplane. So a big part of the story is overcoming fear. So in addition to overcoming the fear of being the first Black pilots in the military, they're also overcoming their fear of being in these like really monstrous, dangerous airplanes that were designed to do one thing, which was, kill Nazis. The planes were not designed for their comfort. So just getting into the cockpit was a risk that they had to overcome. I hope that I've viewed you with a sense of the emotion that I bring to this. This is really like modeling, and that's when I pitch stories like that, I'm always like on the edge of my seat, and I'm just trying to pitch it on the emotional level of that. I would be quiet. Back to you.
Okay, Yannick, I'm going to come to you next. You have a vast amount of experience writing really deeply moving stories. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about the process of coming up with ideas. Because on the one hand, we have this rich legacy of stories, historical stories about the airmen, but we want to try to, obviously, we want to continue to tell those stories. But in some ways, we may want to update those stories. Maybe there's some new information that we could bring to those stories. But also, we want to bring that legacy into today and to try to find new stories that maybe reflect the legacy of the airmen. Can you kind of walk us through the process of sort of coming up with those type of story ideas that we could pitch?
Okay. So one of the things that you want to do is, I mean, the history is very rich. So that's in and of itself a wonderful story to tell. But you also want to piggyback on some different things that are going on. So keep in mind when there's observances coming up like Veterans Day, 4th of July, and even, I'm going to use Cheryl as an example, even like Father's Day. So if there's, say it's a women's magazine, or it could be a newspaper, TV station, or whatever. So for Father's Day, maybe you pitch something on Daddy's Girls or something like that. Because she said she's the daughter of an airman.
And I was a daddy's girl.
And she's a
It's
daddy's
only
girl.
one.
Only one. So sometimes if you look at the children and the spouses of a lot of airmen, they're very accomplished in addition to the airmen themselves. So some of them we've heard of, like Robin Roberts and Cheryl Thompson, but there's some other people we haven't heard of as well too. So for a Father's Day pitch, you could talk about, do something on daughters or specific daughters. So she's from Chicago. So if you were responsible for trying to get stories out there or nationally, you might pitch, because it's also the Homegirl Does Good story, is in addition to being Daddy's Girl story, because she did a brief introduction, but she's very, very accomplished. So, and she just told you she's winning an award in the fall. So, and that's another pick, when her award comes out, when her book comes out, things like that.
Next year.
Next year. Okay, so next year, 2025. What month?
Don't know that yet.
Don't know that
That's
yet.
up to the
Okay,
promotion.
all right. So you would keep tabs on things like that, so that you know when that was coming out. You know when she's getting the award. You're looking at Father's Day. You're looking at pushing people for Veterans Day. You're looking at 4th of July. September 15th is International Democracy Day. And if you listen to a lot of the stories of airmen, they're talking about democracy and their patriotism, what the country means to them, and how they were giving back even though everything wasn't given to them. And just also, if there's a story that's about fighter jets, or something dealing with airlines, because a lot of them became pilots at airline companies, things to any different directions you can go into, whether it's engineering or those kind of things. So you want to it's almost like a not the ways people are using Me Too now, but picking up that Me Too thing, or this person is not just doing that, look at this person over here. Also, I remember Colonel McGee. I remember meeting him when they had the movie that came out. So, and he was saying that that there were other heroes. He talked about the mechanics and the technicians and the medics and things like that. And we don't hear about them very much. We hear about the pilots mostly, but we don't hear about some of the people behind the scenes. And then also sometimes for people who have passed on, talking to their wives and talking to their children, because they know those stories very well because they've heard them all the time and they've lived them too. And also getting to some of the how and the why of story too. Sometimes people are focusing on dates. People did this then, or they did this in this city, or they were in this war, or in this fight, or something like that. But talking about how they felt, what they went through, what it took to get to where they are, what was it like to relocate from cities that they were in to go down to Tuskegee to train, or to go overseas, or to travel with their families and they weren't able to stay on base. So, getting into some of the things behind the scenes, of what kind of lessons were given to them from their family members, and what were they trying to instill in their children, who they are, what their character is. So those kind of things add flesh to the story. And then also putting it in context too about what was going on at the time. So, and one of the things when he was talking about, I worked on a series. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, a former tire rubber company, rubber capital of the world. So I was looking at the impact of the rubber industry on health. So in the process of doing that, I talked to a lot of people who worked in the rubber industry, and also trying to find them because some of them have passed on. But also looking at their migration stories. Why did they come to Akron? or why did they come to Detroit or Chicago or New York or wherever they went to? And then why did they leave? What made them leave? And sometimes it was they had to get out of town, to cover night. So some people will give you details and some people won't. So probing and those kind of things, but looking at the legacy, trying to make it contemporary for some people, because there's some people who will, even though it's a rich history, their eyes will glaze over, and you have to make it interesting and relevant to them.
Thank you. Glenn, I'm coming to you next. For a person, maybe people in this room who haven't worked in a newsroom like we have, the media can really just seem like a sort of a very mysterious place, and journalists can seem like very strange people. You send them press releases, and they don't respond, or you get them on the phone, they're short with you, they say, I'm on deadline, Glenn, can you give us some insight as to sort of the mindset of a journalist and kind of what they're looking for? One of the things that's important to a journalist is, if they're being pitched, they want to make sure it has news value, whether there's newsworthiness to it. Can you explain that process and explain why that's important for a person pitching needs to know? And also, if you could share some of your tips for pitching.
Thank you. And yes, I was, as a editor and as a senior editor and top editor, I was everything that Dion just described. I was that grouchy editor, and if you sent me a press release or my team a press release, yes, 95% of them went in the trash. Because having a bake sale or something like that, a Friday night fish fry, no. As the other speakers talked about, it has to be unique, but around anniversaries, around birthdays, around historic events like Colonel Ware, 100-year-old original, is here at the conference. That's a story. That's a very, very important story. And the longer he is with us, and hopefully for a long time, that continues to be a great story. For every one of his birthdays or every one of his, little achievements is very, very important. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was here this morning, meeting with him. That's how important he is to the legacy of Tuskegee Airmen. Pitching a story, knowing what you want to say, knowing what you want to say. As a couple of the other speakers talked about, know who you want to say it to. And yes, you'll have to do some research and hopefully find some names also, because you do not want to send blind. Any emails, any texts, any videos, any press releases, don't send any blind, to anybody, because it'll be rejected. Although a lot of news organizations have what is called info at NPR or news at NPR, where you can send directly to the news department and they'll get it, and then they'll decipher from there whether or not they want to use your information. And when you're putting a pitch together, whatever it is, whether it's a list of facts, whether it's an absolute written release, whether it's a text, whatever it is, no misspellings, no grammar, make sure that it's the best that it can be, and that it's looked over by maybe several members of your organization to make sure that, because fortunately or not, we journalists frown on that. We frown on misspellings and grammar. Well, we'll give you a pass, but misspellings and factual errors, no, because even though you send us something, us good journalists, we're going to check it out. We're going to do our own research to make sure what you just told us is absolutely true, because we don't want to put something out there and then get kicked back that it was wrong. So yes, just be very mindful, very careful of the information that you put together, that you send out. One thing that I have always told organizations and companies, corporations, nonprofits, don't be afraid to contact a media organization and offer to have coffee with someone. You know, the managing editor, the senior editor, whoever, you know, the investigative editor like Cheryl. See who you can have a 10-minute, 15-minute coffee with, because that way they know you and you know them. If you send something, then there's no mystique about it. They may or may not use it, but still you've established the relationship, and that's extremely important. And you know, and even though they don't use it, stay in contact with that person. At least send them a note periodically and say, you know, I'm still representing Tuskegee Airmen, and you know, if you know, I would like to continue to send you information. Is there anything specifically that you're looking for that your organization may use to, you know, to help promote, you know, our organization? And well, I talked about follow-up, but yeah, get a name, as you know, if you can, and if you can, just look for something online or that says, you know, news at or information box or something that you're able to send people quickly. My band is not Tuskegee Airmen, it's Montford Point Marine Association, which is one of the other brother and sister organizations, because we went through the same thing. And there's 20,000 brothers that went through Camp Montford Point in Jacksonville from 42 to 49. And we're in the process, as you folks are, in finding the members and getting them their congressional gold medals. And our chapter alone has presented 8 congressional gold medals in the last probably 6 or 7 years. And our gala is in October, and we're presenting 2 more. So that's another thing, you know, for all the members, please try to be on the hunt for all the additional Tuskegee Airmen that have not been found yet. You know, whether they passed or not, try to find their families, and, you know, because they deserve that. They deserve that. And like, you know, my partners over here said, you know, all of us are in the hunt to preserve the legacy of all these organizations as much we can. There are 47 chapters of Montford Point Marines around the country, and you know, and we have worked with some chapters of Tuskegee Airmen, so we appreciate that effort as well. And finally, to push these unique stories. Brenda Robinson, who's the first Black woman Navy pilot, lives in Charlotte. Carl Gamble, who's the only pilot in history who was shot down in Nam, and he was also hijacked to Cuba when he was a pilot for Piedmont. So we have both of those folks in our area, and we've done extensive stories about them. All the news media has covered them. They've been on NPR. They've been on a number of other national stations and networks, and so continue to push the history, because it's very important that it can never be forgotten.
I just wanted to add one thing too. That I meant to, it's like right now, like from 1944, the mid 40s, there's a lot of like the 80th anniversary of a lot of different things that happened. So this is also a good time to kind of revisit some of those things and push them out.
I'm gonna grant that.
No.
I gotta grant that.
Yes. I do want to just piggyback on that, because you really make a good point, Glenn, about knowing who you're pitching to, because I get a gazillion emails a day, and clearly people don't know that I do investigative journalism. They'll send me an email about a pet cemetery. Well, unless all the pets have been dug up and thrown on the road, then I can't really help you. So it really is important to know because I just toss them. Now, the one email that I always take a look at, yes, I'm biased, is from one of my former students who's a PR person on the Hill. But not so much for content, but for grammar and spelling to ensure that after he graduated, he took what I taught him away.
Hold on for the mic, because I'm coming to you.
Okay.
Let me get to Cheryl and then we'll come back to you.
Sorry.
No, I can take it.
So Cheryl, there are two different roles that a PR person can play. One is to pitch the media, and the other is to be on the receiving end of a call from the media from a reporter who's working on a story. And to tell you the truth, I would really, I'd be shaking if I were to get a call from Cheryl W. Thompson, because I know that Cheryl W. Thompson has sent people to jail, including high-level people.
Prison. There's a difference.
Right. She sent people to prison.
Prison is over.
Exactly. But Cheryl, can you sort of give us some insight as to what your expectations would be for a public relations person that you're reaching out to? Maybe you even talk about a story that you did and sort of like what role they played in helping you, set up interviews and photo shoots. I know NPR does photos as well, but photo shoots or whatever, getting data. I think this would be helpful to know because sometimes you might get a call from a reporter who's interested in maybe tracking some history of somebody in your chapter or something like that, and it's really good to know sort of what the expectations are and what you'd be, what you should be doing in order to carry out what it is.
Well, first, I think it's important for PR people to understand what our jobs are as journalists and not to try and spin us, because you can call a PR person for something and they'll try to like steer you in a different direction because for me, it's not going to make the agency look good. And so that's my first thing, because we know what we're looking for as journalists. When we come to you, you should have an idea, we should have an idea of what it is we're looking for. For instance, I may call you to get information about somebody I'm writing about who attended your university, right? So let's take a Tuskegee Airmen, for instance. And I call the university. This actually happened like within the last week. And I called the university, I emailed the university, got an email back from somebody who didn't even sign it. I was asking for dates of attendance, very basic stuff. Was this person involved in any activities, any photos you might have, yada, yada, yada. And the person said to me, we need a release form from the family. So I wrote back and I said, this person is dead. So they wrote back, we're happy to help you, but we need a release form. And so I asked the name of the person because she clearly wasn't going to help me, even though she said she was happy to help. She was probably a PR person, so she didn't give me any information. So what I did was I then called the president's office. That's just me. And I got the president's assistant, and I had the information within 2 days. No release form necessary. So like, he's dead. He has no family. Like, what do you want me to? Where am I supposed to get this release form from? And so sometimes you run into people, most PR people I run into are not helpful. I'm just gonna say, they're not helpful to me. They may be helpful to somebody else, but they're not helpful to me. So I try to avoid PR people at all costs. Sorry, Paula, she stood up in the back because she's a PR person. I'm just saying. So when I call you, that means you're gonna be really helpful to me. And so recently, like we did an investigation into sort of a boring topic, but it was very cool. It was a trench collapse deaths, people who work in trenches and they die because the equipment's not there or whatever. And so I had to deal with OSHA. Well, dealing with the federal government is never an easy thing. And so I had to go through their PR people. And it was just like back and forth and back and forth. And so I had my colleague and we were like, good. I always like good cop, bad cop, and I guess you guys know by now I'm kind of a bad cop. And so I had him reach out to the PR person, and then she told me, she said, well, I said, well, let me call you because I'm tired of this back and forth with emails. And she says, well, I'm hard of hearing, and so email is better. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So then the next day my colleague says, oh yeah, I talked to so-and-so. I was like, wait a minute. I thought she told me she was deaf. Like, how did you talk? Did you sign? Or like, what happened? And so I called her, I emailed her, I said, I thought you told me you didn't take photos. She said, well, he was nicer than you.
Oh, wow.
So that was like, it's not my job to be nice. It's my job to get information, you know. But I mean, it's that kind of stuff that you're up against sometimes when you're dealing with PR people. And I mean, this one, we went around because I had to go through her to get every interview that I needed. I had to go through her to get data. You know, it was just sort of like, and they don't make it easy for you. It's almost like PR people want you to go away. And we're not going to go away. And so, unless it's a happy story about their agency, then they're really thrilled to talk to you. But if it's something that they think might make them not look good, then they're going to like give you a hard time. So, did I answer that question?
You did.
Or did I just take out my anger from this woman, you know, now on this woman now that the story's
I think you had a great answer.
Okay.
A quick piggyback on Cheryl's comment. I was press secretary for Congressman Dan Micah from Florida. And being press secretary for a House member, you don't, you know, that was part of my 40-year career when I, was going to blow my brains out and went to the dark side, but then I came back to journalism like I should. But no, Cheryl's right. You know, I would not tell newspaper or broadcast people anything, because I knew the other side. You know, I knew, all the journalists and, from Florida and nationally, I knew a lot of them, and they were like, well, we're friends. No, we're not. No, we're not. I'm not telling you anything. And as Cheryl alluded, my job was not to tell you anything under any circumstances. I'm not giving you any information at all. And, and then I bumped my head again and came back to real journalism.
Thanks. Adele, I want to go to you next. I think that you have a really good example of what happens when a pitch hits with the reporter, and there's something in the pitch that sparks the reporter's interest, and they're able to maybe even do a story that might even be beyond what the PR person expected in the original pitch. I'm wondering, Adele, if you could talk about your story that you did on the Memphis sanitation worker on the 50th anniversary of the strike.
Thank you, Dan. Again, I'm really happy to be here. It's really wonderful to hear what everyone's talking about on this panel. And what I'm going to hone in on is the word anniversary. I knew that the anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. was coming up, and I knew I wanted to write a story. And because I work for a religion news service, I was looking for the religion angle. So I think there's two things I want to make sure you hear. One is look for timely hooks, which is anniversaries, and also understand what the beat is of the people you're contacting. In my case, I was sent this information, and I think it was a more generic pitch as we've been discussing. So sometimes those do work out if the reporter does some digging. So this was a pitch about I Am 2018, which was a reference to the I Am a Man signs that sanitation workers used when they were striking 50 years before the time I was working on the story. And this campaign was spearheaded by both the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, a union, and the Church of God in Christ, a historic Black Pentecostal denomination. And as I said, I was looking for ways to cover this. I knew I wanted to go to Memphis, but I didn't know why, like what would be the hook for me. So I saw a mention early on, 2 or 3 months before the actual anniversary date, of a memorial for sanitation workers. There was a wreath ceremony in honor of Robert Walker and Eccles Cole. These men were tragically killed in their garbage truck. There was a storm, and they took cover within the truck where the garbage goes, and there was a malfunction, and they died. And that's the reason the sanitation workers struck, because the conditions were so bad that their colleagues were killed. And that's eventually what led King to Memphis, because he was joining that strike. So I was talking to a minister who was leading this IAM 2018 campaign and asked him about this memorial service, which was like in February. And he mentioned that he was going to be giving a closing prayer at this ceremony. But he said the person who's giving the opening prayer, like him, was a minister, but also was a sanitation worker. And not only was he a sanitation worker, he was still a sanitation worker 50 years afterwards. Someone, there you go. And I did say, is he well? You know, because that is a question at that point, and that would make a difference in how the story would go. And the answer was, fortunately, yes. And so I traveled to Memphis. I traveled a month ahead of time, knowing that churches tend to have, or at least at that time, you know, the most people on the first Sunday. So I went the first Sunday of his church, got to see it in action, got to see him in action, and got to interview him the next day at the headquarters of his union. And so some of the work I did involved my own videography and picture taking, but my news organization, Religion News Service, was interested enough in this story that they hired a professional videographer who helped tell this man's story. And it was very moving. He was there for the Been to the Mountaintop sermon right before he died. He talked about the weather that night, how awful it was outside raining, and how King's words were so hopeful. And then the next day, he got choked up just talking about it. King had died. So it was an amazing turn of events that only came from, you know, one person telling me one thing and my asking one question that actually really led to an entire project that included commentaries and other things. While I was in Memphis, I not only found out more about the sanitation workers and their role in Black history and civil rights history, but I also wrote about the various buildings in Memphis that had religious connections, but that were still in some way tied to the striking of these workers. So, for instance, Lorraine Martel, which became the National Civil Rights Museum, Claiborne Temple, which is a church where the signs, the I Am a Man signs, were made in the basement, and the strikers marched from that church. And then also Mason Temple, where he gave his last sermon, which is church related. So there were ways for me to have an angle on this story because I was a religion reporter, but it was a much bigger story because it was a Black history story, and it was an aha moment for some people. I've had many people tell me when I talk about this, like, oh, I never knew. You know, some people didn't even know why King was in Memphis. So the point of all this is to say that you never know what you're going to find if you dig enough as a reporter, but also when you pitch it to a reporter. So it is helpful to know that you're talking to someone with a particular beat, but it's kind of a combination of your work and theirs to have it down. So I do want to say that it's a kind of thing where you also need to tell journalists early enough. So when an anniversary is coming up, don't call them a week before if you want them to do a big detailed story or have that opportunity. And you might get in touch with them a couple of months ahead, which is what happened in my case. But you might remind them again when it's a month out, because for some of them, like, oh no, I can't deal with this yet. It really depends on who you're pitching to. So I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Adele. So we have about 6 minutes left before we will open it up for questions. And I do want to get to some of the storytelling tools. So I'm just wondering if we can maybe keep the answers a little bit shorter so that we can get everything in the next 6 minutes. The first thing I want to talk about is interviewing. And Yannick, I wonder if you could kind of give us some storytelling tips. Maybe you could also talk about maybe some unique challenges that you faced in doing the Akron story.
Okay. Also, I worked on a biography of Althea Gibson too, so I talked to a lot of her family members and fellow athletes and just people she knew. So I ran into some of the same things with that, working on that project as well as working on the rubber industry series. One thing is that sometimes you're dealing with people who aren't interviewed a lot, so you have to make them comfortable. And sometimes if it's your family member, sometimes it's conversational, so you may have to talk to them several different times. Sometimes if it's someone who is kind of, they don't get out much or they don't talk to people much, you're gonna you're gonna do T and some other things first before they even get to anything. You know, they're gonna tell you, but they're gonna tell you in their own time and way. So you have to be patient as well. But you have to, you also have to make people understand the importance of their stories, because sometimes people went through it and they don't really see the significance of it, and they may be glossing over something. So when we're talking about like the how and the why and what made them do certain things, and kind of reliving that day, sometimes going over pictures with them, that's a good way too, because then you can get what we call color to put into your stories when you have those vivid, rich details that bring stories to life. And capturing their voice too, so making sure that you're recording it so that you include some actual quotes, and it's not, you want to have a balance between what you're writing and also what they're saying too. So it shouldn't be all quotes, but it shouldn't be all bland without any quotes too in there. So having kind of an ear, what we call an ear for quotes. But that color is really important in terms of adding the details and putting meat and flesh on the bones, to make it come to life, to make people feel like they were there. You want to engage people's senses so that they can think about what something smelled like, what it sounded like, if you're talking about the roar of a plane, or, you know, hearing things, you know, hearing bombs and things like that. So you want to transport them someplace so they can see it too. So definitely think about those senses and asking those type of questions, and letting, sometimes in these situations, you know, sometimes when we do interviews, we're more to the point, and we may, you know, try to get it in quickly. But sometimes in what you're doing, you may have to kind of, like I said, spend more time so that people are talking a little bit more and you're getting the details out. I'm going to stop. I think we have 6 minutes.
Cheryl, can you talk about the significance and the importance of documents and records? A lot of stories are told through documents and records. And documents and records can also be used to sort of verify what people say in interviews, but you know, then there are a lot of stories that are found in those documents.
Yeah, and I think particularly in investigative journalism, I mean, I live by records, and I love analyzing records. Who knew? Because I was, you know, they say journalists aren't good and bad, but I love going through records and looking at numbers and analyzing things. But I think the type of records you will go after will depend on the kinds of stories you're doing, right? So if you want to do a story about workplace deaths, right? The Bureau of Labor Statistics has great databases. The Justice Department keeps all kinds of data on crimes and, you know, homicides and guns and those kinds of things, and police officers who were killed. If you want to find out whether your physician has been disciplined, every state has a medical board. And all of this stuff is online that you can get to really easily. It doesn't cost anything. With my research with the Tuskegee Airmen, you know, I went through, oh my God, I've poured through so many records, but military records and newspaper clippings and university archives, just a ton of records exist. And for instance, I was finishing up a chapter yesterday, and I'm writing about this one guy, and I noticed in a document that he had gone AWOL at some point. And I thought, why would an airman go AWOL in the middle of a war? And I went back to my notes, and I went back to when he was married, when his wife had a baby, and I saw that she had this baby, and 6 days later, he went AWOL. Now, my guess, and it's only a guess because he's not around, is he went AWOL to go home and see his newborn baby. So then I call up the one relative he has, and I said, hey, did you know she didn't know that he had gone AWOL. She didn't know any of this, but she said it makes perfect sense, right? That's why he went AWOL, because those guys didn't go AWOL. They just didn't. And so, but it was those records that helped me connect the dots. You know, there's when the baby was born, and then 6 days later, he went AWOL, and then of course the really terse letter from his commanding officer who said, I should court-martial you, but I'm gonna cut you some slack, and I'm just gonna dock you, okay, you know. But all of those records play a role in telling the story. You can put them, connect the dots, and that's what investigative journalism is about. That's what storytelling is about. It's about connecting the dots.
Sure. Adele, can you tell us the significance of using experts who can kind of put things into context for you? You are working on a book as well, and you're interviewing a lot of experts. Can you talk about the importance of that briefly?
Okay, sure. So I'm working on a book called Becoming a Future Ready Church, Shifts to Encourage and Empower the Next Generation of Leaders. And my task with my co-authors was to do stories that exemplify these different shifts we're talking about, like for instance, having more digital churches, for instance, and not just having people in person for worship. And so for me, first of all, the experts were these examples of average clergy who were doing innovative things. So that's one way of looking at it, is find the innovative aspect of things to pitch to people, pitch to journalists. That's something that might interest them. But then you also might point out say your chapter is here in the Washington area, and there's a professor in Virginia or Maryland who knows about Tuskegee Airmen. You might point that out to the local regional reporter as somebody who can be a source for them. So when I wrote about the sanitation workers and their history and the changes in Memphis, I interviewed a seminary professor at a seminary in Memphis. So he was able to give the local context and compare what it was like then from what he knew to what it was like now. And so those are the things you need with an expert. They kind of fill in the gaps between, sometimes people may have be on one side or the other. The experts will have the data and the information that sort of brings it all together. And it's just an additional voice that kind of fills out the story.
Mike, I started with you, I'm going to end with you. And if you could just briefly talk about, I know many of you may say, hey, I'm not a writer, I'm not going to really be able to do any of this stuff. I think Mike has a couple of suggestions for you. One is, you could do a blog, and you could talk about various platforms that you could use for that. But another thing too is to hire a ghostwriter. And Mike is actually a ghostwriter. He's written several books. So can you really talk about those areas briefly, because we are really past time.
I will speak fast. First of all, I just want to second that emotion. Glenn raised a really good point, which is just because someone rejects your pitch initially doesn't mean you can't come back. I would say that I usually, when I was the business editor at the Stanford Advocate, I would usually pick up on the third pitch, okay, because that meant that they were serious. So just because someone rejects your pitch the first time, keep going back to them. You all know how to be consistent and persistent in a polite way. Just
Call
do
me
that.
if you don't.
Because that does count. You wear them down. Now, the other thing that I just want to pick up on is spirituality. Now, when I was a journalist, working journalist, if anybody mentioned God, it was like immediately go away. Now it's the opposite, right? Okay, one, as I'm older, but two, we all know that society has changed. Take advantage of that. There's a spiritual angle to flying. I'm sorry for going like all gooey on you, but as a pilot, I'm very, very aware of my relationship. In other words, there's a great book called God is My Co-Pilot. Yeah. I get it. Okay, so that being said, back to you. All right, don't get hung up on the idea of pitching traditional media. And by all means, please don't judge yourself on the basis of whether or not your pitches are successful with local newspapers and cable TV. All right, think outside the box, or as pilots say, think outside the envelope. All right. The idea is just getting regular people to think about the Tuskegee Airmen and their place in history, which means that your best audience are students, right? Students. Kids love this kind of stuff, all right? Elementary students, middle school students, high school students, even college students, right? Because they are looking for things to write about. Right? In other words, pitch your schools, your colleges, and your libraries. Librarians are also your friends, all right? Think of ways to collaborate with teachers and librarians to create mini lesson plans and activities, right? It's like if I were a kid and someone had said, draw a picture of a P-38, I would have loved it, So, okay, so do that. Draw pictures of in other words, anything that involves multimedia, is now fair game, right? Because now all kids know how to do multimedia. So, there's nothing better than flying the airmen and all of and everybody around them. Creating posters that says, those of you who are teachers, it's like, that's the standard assignment, creating a poster. writing letters to airmen, whether they're alive or dead, writing letters to the descendants of the airmen. You can pitch these ideas to teachers and they will love you because teachers are always looking for practical ideas and things like that. Yes, and blogging, there's absolutely no reason why you can't self-publish your own work. Okay, as much as I respect my, my colleagues who are still working in journalism, my suggestion to you is to write your own work, publish it, hold yourself to the highest possible standards. What Glenn said goes. In other words, no spelling, no grammar issues, no factual issues. Make sure somebody looks at your work, and then figure out a way to self-publish it. LinkedIn is your best free multimedia, publishing platform. I use LinkedIn for all my stuff, and it also generates a lot of work for me. And I'm done. Thank you. I hope that was helpful.
Do you want to mention ghostwriting briefly?
No, yes. I mean, it's like saying I'm a hitman. It's like, so the answer to that is no. That's a weird job, and it does. And now you're going to get my two journalist friends who start hitting me afterwards. But that's a rough job, but it's worth it. What's interesting about it is that I particularly enjoy being a ghostwriter for women because it allows me to embody their personality. In other words, it's like being an actor. You get to be somebody else. And it's also dangerous because half the time they realize after you've written something about them that they don't want it published. Now be quiet.
No, I was going to say,
Oh, sorry. No, it's it's an emotionally fraught. It's much more emotionally dangerous to yourself than being a journalist. Being a journalist is a clean job. Being a ghostwriter is not. So, but if you need me, you know where to reach me.
You're available.
Okay, to co-sign Mike's comments about books. I published 6 books and I'm working on 3 right now. And they're all self-published. In fact, my company, we work with a number of authors and have for, I don't know, almost a dozen years. And the key is when you self-publish, the key is marketing, because I was able to sell several thousand books, more than some of the traditional folks who have went through traditional publishers. And but it's all about the marketing and getting the word out about your book, and not being afraid of that. But the key is first to research and write it. Research and write it, and if you can find the right marketing strategy and the right company or individual to help you market it, you can be very, very successful.
Okay, it's now your turn. Do we have questions? By the way, before we ask questions, how many people here are actually doing PR work for their chapters? Oh, good. Quite a few of you are. Great. Yeah. Questions?
Let's start right here with the self-publishing and marketing. What's the best source to go through to try to market something that you self-publish?
Well, you just have to find a company. We're available. We work nationwide. But yeah, you just, if you have a friend, colleague, that owns a marketing company that's very versed in marketing strategies, you use them to, as we have talked about, the panel has talked about, all the ways to market, whether it's a blog, whether it's word of mouth, whether it's emails, whether it's text, whether it's, tiki-taki or what, all the new social media platforms. But yeah, the marketing is very important, but still not as important as writing it, getting it out there first.
Any other questions? Yes.
First of all, thank you all for being here. This has been very helpful. I write books for children, and so one of the things that I deal with right now is book bans. Have become fairly common, particularly because I wrote a book about the Freemanville Mutiny. People aren't happy hearing about that. I contributed to a book called The Anti-Racist Kitchen. You put anti-racist on the front of a book, that's always trouble. It it expands past book sales and book availability to publishers are starting to get skittish about publishing books with that kind of content. I'm also finding journalists are starting to get very skittish about participating in or writing stories that have that kind of content. You all seem quite fearless, but I just wanted some thoughts on maybe some ways to approach journalists in particular for help getting stories. It used to be someone. My book, The Freeman Field Photograph, came out in 2020, which was the 75th anniversary of the photograph being published. I didn't have time to do all of the media interviews and things like that people were requesting. But I've seen now over time, as I've started to talk to people, they would love to do the story, but I'm not sure my editor will like this, and might be an issue with some of our readers and so forth. I'm just wondering if you all have some thoughts on maybe ways to pitch it that might soften that blow without softening the message, which is important and needs to stay intact.
There's still a lot of fearless journalists out there.
I'm seeing that today. Yeah.
And also you can go through some of the journalism organizations and chapters and stuff. She mentioned Washington Association of Black Journalists earlier. So NABJ has chapters all across the country, and Society of Professional Journalists, National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Also for books that are banned, some libraries are working with different organizations that are buying banned books to help promote them. And I can't think of Ryan's last name, it just left my head. But are you in the, you're not in DC area, right?
No, ma'am, I'm in Northern California.
Okay. She said you man.
Get me in trouble over here.
But anyway, Ryan Williams. But you could Ryan Williams at the DC Public Library here, the Martin Luther King branch. So I know he's worked with some organizations that do that, and he was also a member of NABJ, or still is, but you could probably contact him and he'd be helpful to tell you about some other places that help to promote books that have been banned or have the potential to be banned, or that they're sensitive to. And he's helped to promote a lot of books, and sometimes some of the people who come to speak at the library are not based in Washington, they're all over the country. So also that's another thing, to consider libraries outside of your region for that, and contact the journalism organizations.
Just quickly, I'm 72, so I'm old enough to have seen what we're doing. We're living right now at the end of a really vicious, nasty cycle. I just have a real feeling that we're on the beginning of an upswing. Call me, wildly optimistic, but the last 8 years have been very difficult, and everybody, skittish is the right word. I think we're getting over our skittishness. Not that anybody at this table has ever had a problem with that, but for other people, they're getting over it.
And also some of the young journalists, like I teach at Howard, we have a lot of campus media. I'm at YLAM at howard.edu, so we can pass things on there. And I forgot to mention that I'm working on a book called In My Backyard, How Pollution and Climate Change Are Making Black Americans Sick to Death.
I just want to add that even though some journalists may have said, I don't know what my editor is going to say, there are some journalists whose beat is race. And so I would encourage you to search for them. And because sometimes people think the book ban issue, we've written about that already. But that's a new wrinkle. Children's books, etc. And it's like the next generation. There's so many pieces of that make it potentially a really good story. So I would encourage you to keep at it.
And I think your question is why diversity matters in newsrooms, because I don't know to whom you were pitching, whether they were of color, but I would take it to someone of color, and someone fearless of color who would go to the editor and go, listen, this is really important story to tell because of XYZ. It's not always going to work, but at least you stand a better chance.
Yeah, what I found is finding people of color in newsrooms is easier the farther east I travel. When you start in California.
Oh, you're in Northern California?
I'm in Northern California. So when you start in California and then Nevada, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, that's a challenge. And the further east I get, the easier.
You got to come to this side of the country.
But you have better wine. You have better wine.
And you got the Midwest too.
We are at time.
We're everywhere.
Paula, do I have time for one more question, or should I? Okay. I think you had your hand up in the back. Yes.
Thank you guys very much. I missed this next door. I wish so much that you could.
I bet they weren't as fun. They weren't as much fun over there.
Everything It's all good. Everybody's good. Everybody counts. But you said you were at Howard?
Yes.
The media journalism school?
Yeah, Department of Media, Journalism, and Film in the School of Kathy Hughes School of Communications.
And then where were you?
Oh, I'm at George Washington University
And
in the School of Media and Public Affairs.
and
I'm
the
a
lady who was
journalist
talking about
consultant,
I'm sorry.
leadership consultant.
And you were mentioning
I work for
Memphis
Religion
there.
News.
Huh?
I work for Religion News Service. Memphis was just the story I wrote about at the time.
Well, I'm related to Emmett Till, and we've just went through a lot of this for the last 4 years.
Oh, well, I work for NPR, so we should talk.
So, well, I'm here because I'm also the president of the Los Angeles chapter. And Hollywood is very, very sophisticated in terms of journalism and everything. And I've learned this firsthand these last 3 years. I'm a 2-term elected president. I live in the state of Florida where they're banning books. Okay, so what we decided to do there is, since we come from STEM to STEAM, now it's STREAM, Make America Read Again. Thank you. So everybody's got a book, everybody's got a story, and I'm not here to talk or comment. I'm just saying thank you all for coming to do this. I wish we could broaden this more while we're here, or the next convention, or just have something on a Zoom. This is really needed, I believe, in all of our chapters. This particular lesson. You all are local here. I always tell people, look, when you come to the DMV, it's a bubble. Everybody, the rest of the country don't count, but the bubble. And that's just the way it is. You see how you just said, oh, you on the West Coast. You need to come over here. It's everybody counts and everybody matters everywhere. And everybody's got to tell a story. And they're all coming out now. So I just say thank you so much. Thank you, Memphis, my roots. We've got somebody here from Memphis here, Taste of Aviation, part of the Memphis team, which is part of the Tuskegee Airmen, which is part of about 5 more OBAP, everybody. And, my cousin was Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers, and we're doing a lot down there. We just got the first VA named after him, the first VA medical center in the whole world, named after Tuskegee Airmen. First ever. School down in the Luke Weathers Flight Academy, which is now the headquarters, the official headquarters of OBAP. And there's a lot we've been going. This is my 5th rodeo, and I'm tired. So I'm turning it over, and one student at a time. You hear me? And I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I would love to get to know each and every one of you. Thank you. The Ghost Rider.
All right, Paula, is that it, or is there time for one more question?
You have time for one more question.
Okay, who had the question?
And Josh had his hand up over there, too.
Okay, if you can make it quick, then we can get 2 questions.
Very quick. I just want to thank all of you who are on the panel. This convention session, I've been working with Paula on the PR committee, and she has put together a fabulous consortium of reporters and journalists. I'm from the Detroit chapter, and I have been with Detroit Black Journal, which is Detroit PBS, for 34 years. I am also with the National Academy of Television Arts and Science. And the information that you've received today is just out of the box. But what you need to know is everything they told you applies. When you go to pitch a story, if you get a no, go back. Get 10 no's before you're going to get that yes. But when you do, you also have to be prepared and ready with your questions and with your enthusiasm. Because the carrot that's in place is that every journalist, when we tell a story, when we put segments on PBS and we tell history, we tell race, we tell all of it, there is this entity called the Emmy Awards for television. And there is also for print, because what we did in the last several years is expand because of online producing. So all of your stories have to be well developed so that you can tell and share and help pre-produce with your journalists, your reporters, so they can prepare segments and pieces that are worthy to be submitted for an Emmy. That's the carrot. You pitch the story. The broadcaster pitches and wants to make sure that they hit the festivals, they hit the newspapers and their editors, but they also are looking to be involved and get an award. We have our Emmy Awards in June in Michigan. And what happens, we have so many stories that are heart-wrenching stories. And they get up and they want to thank their moms, their dads, God. And we want to thank that so-and-so organization because that was the story and pulled and tugged at the heartstrings. So know that you have been treated to a fabulous presentation. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Josh, did you want to make a quick?
It's a really quick question. Thank you. I have a question about being on the other side of all of you. So about how to be a good interviewee. So I get interviewed a lot, and usually when I get interviewed, it's about either a red tail or a buffalo soldier. But I feel like I might be interviewed by Mike Rowan at the Washington Post, and then somebody from New York Times or something like that. But I feel like because I'm trying to keep into my office's message, I'm saying the same thing to everybody. And is that okay? I'm trying to stay on message, but I always come out of it feeling like, man, I feel like I'm giving everybody the same story to tell, but I'm getting the message, I'm getting the story out there, but
Turn it around and ask them what they're interested in. Just spin it on them. In other words, if they're a good journalist, the three of us, if you suddenly said, Mike, what do you really want to know? We're gonna give it right back to them. So do that. Thank you.
I say don't answer their questions, just answer mine, because I've interviewed you.
There's that too, yes. There's that too.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Paula.
We can stick around for a few minutes afterwards if anybody has questions.
We give a hand to our
Thank you, panelists, and thank you on behalf of the Tuskegee Airmen for bringing your talent, your time, and your expertise to us. I hope that you all walk away with some tools, some tips, some resources, some information to be better storytellers. I know I am. I'm a journalist by profession also. Ended my career in 2009 and came to what they're calling the dark side, which is public affairs and public relations. But I'm also a veteran of the Air Force, 26 years of active duty guard and reserve time, and I did meteorology and public affairs for the Air Force. So I enjoy telling stories. I'm a storyteller.
Chief, you're a chief. Tell them that.
And a retired
Chief Master Sergeant.
So I'm the storyteller of my family. So I appreciate you all coming today. Thank you again to our wonderful, talented panel of storytellers. That's it for today. Enjoy the rest of the conference. I know some of you may linger and want to talk to them. And if you have time, I know that some of you have to leave, but they're here for you. Thank you again.
Can I just say this?
Sure.
Absolutely. My literary, I guess we've been cut off.
Yeah.
That's okay.
It expired.
We've been cut off. The name of the book is forgotten, so my literary agent said, yes, of course, you better mention it.
So,
Thank you.